Hello and welcome to this video on subsidies to correct market failure. In this video, we're going to look at what is meant by a subsidy, illustrate the impact of a subsidy, and talk about how a subsidy can be used to correct market failure. So we're talking here about the market failure in particular that's caused by positive externalities. And so these are where there are beneficial effects on third parties. Let's just remind ourselves of the analysis here and the problems associated with positive externalities. So if we have a particular product, let's say maybe here talking about the level of quantity of education, okay, the number of degrees in society. And what we can see here is if it was left to the free market, the student and the university, we would get QM, level of degrees being taken. Because prior to that, when you look at it, the benefits to the student, this is the value of their associated, and the cost of providing the degrees from the university, these are the costs. And so it'll make sense for these number of degrees to be provided by the free market. Now, what we've said is actually there are lots of external benefits of people getting degrees. They have better skills that their employers can use. They earn more money and this benefits the local community in which they live. They earn more money and they pay more tax, which benefits the government. There are lots of external benefits of getting degrees, which the students don't necessarily take into account. So when we're looking at it from society's perspective, we should add on these external benefits. And as a result, we get a benefit to society line that is much greater than just the private benefits. And when we look at it from society's point of view, where the social cost equals the social benefit, we find that actually from society's point of view, we want many more degrees than the free market would give us. So actually here the market for degrees fails if we just leave it to the free market. In fact, we get an underproduction. We get too few degrees and we would want more from society's perspective, so the free market won't be doing the best job for us. We can go one step further and we can actually quantify the gain that society could have, the extra gain society could have if there were more people taking degrees. And so what we're going to look at here is how might a subsidy help in this situation. First of all, we need to ask ourselves, what is a subsidy? A subsidy is a grant or money usually provided by the government to encourage suppliers to increase production of a good or a service. This leads to a fall in the price paid and indirectly pass on some of the gain to customers. What are the aims of subsidies? Well, the aims of subsidies are to keep prices down and to boost outputs for certain goods and services. You can see where we're going with this. For example, those with positive externalities. It can also help maintain the revenues of producers if there are unstable prices. So subsidies are paid by governments to suppliers have the effect of reducing their costs and encouraging them to increase output. The effect of a government subsidy is to shift out supply, and the total amount spent by the government is equal to the subsidy per unit multiplied by the total amount. We've looked at this form of analysis in the past, where we can see our diagram on the left-hand side, and if the government were to introduce a subsidy, what we can see is that there is a lower price and a greater quantity produced. So if we were to take this analysis and link it back to what we said about positive externalities, if as a result of our subsidy we get a greater quantity being produced at a lower price, then this is going to move us in the direction of the socially optimum output. So we're going to reduce the market failure if through a subsidy more is being produced and there's less of an underproduction. Again, a reminder that we can look at the benefits that go to the producer and the consumer of the introduction of a subsidy by looking at the incidence of a subsidy. So how do subsidies correct market failure? Well, they're often applied to services with a significant external benefit. So for example, degrees you mentioned earlier, education, healthcare. It can also be applied to economic activity which creates less pollution. So for example, public transport and renewable energy. So who typically are the winners and losers if we apply a subsidy to correct market failure? Well, consumers through lower market prices. They're also often the direct recipients of the subsidy, the money. Producers will earn higher revenues. We can also have third parties who are winners if there are positive externality exists, from the subsidised activity. We've got more of those external benefits being realised. On the negative side, in evaluation, there might be some losers from subsidies. So where does all this money come from? Well, from the taxpayer. Some producers might not receive the subsidy, but might have to compete with other firms that do, and that makes it very difficult for them. More inefficient producers will stay in business. For the government, what we've got to consider here, an important thing, is opportunity cost. If we're giving money to fund renewable energy projects, what was the next best alternative use of that money? Perhaps education or healthcare, or there might have been some other use that we have to, as economists, question what was opportunity cost and is this an optimal use of this government finance? So these might be industries that you might want to consider whether your personal viewpoint that they should be subsidized or not. You might want to pause the video, have a look through the 8 we've got here and think, would you associate these with positive externalities? Do you think that governments should be involved in subsidizing them? So in this video, we've looked at what is meant by a subsidy, illustrated the impact of a subsidy, and looked how a subsidy can be used to correct market failure. That's it. Thank you very much for listening.